Thanks for joining us. Episode 2, Only Comics. We are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. We're going to give you our honest feedback, our review. Again, like we said last week, we are not experts, right? We're just fans, and we are going to break down our perspective. We both saw the movie. So, Adrian, how we doing, bro?
We're doing good, man. Beautiful day here in New England.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. 60 degrees,
yes.
Shorts and T-shirts day.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're here. So we both saw the movie. I went Saturday. You went Friday?
I went Friday.
Yeah. What time did you go?
Around 5-ish.
Got it. Was it packed?
No, it was not.
That's
it was
awesome.
not. Not only was it not packed, but I was surprised to see the number of older people.
Yeah.
Not older being 30s, 40s. I mean, like older than me.
Yeah.
So that was a pleasant surprise, actually.
Yeah.
So they definitely have a range of audience.
Right. Well, I mean, I hear it's killing at the box office. Like it's going to be. I think the few day preview, I think they grossed more than the first two Guardians, so it should be a success for Marvel.
Okay.
And I went yesterday. I went 12:30 in the afternoon because I was trying to avoid the crowds, and it was not packed at all. I say the theater was maybe half full.
When I went, it wasn't even half full.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of empty seats. Thankfully for me, because I had an experience, I'll get into it later, but I had an experience, and I needed to be able to move around. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it happens, dude. That's the one downfall of the movie theater, right? But I think we'll give you kind of our ratings of this film, and then we'll just break down and go through our thoughts throughout. So I had to look back, Adrian, because I'm like, I don't want to just score this one, and I need to go through the first two. So for me, of the three Guardians movies, even after seeing the third one, I do like the first one the best still. And I would score that. I'd put an 8. I'd rank solid 8 out of 10. Guardians 1. Guardians 2, I didn't enjoy as much. It actually, like I talked about last week, it took me a few watches to really appreciate that movie. I wasn't a big fan of the ego, the living planet, and all that. I think that got a little too zany for me. So I'd give Guardians 2 probably a 7, 7.25. And then this third one, I'm gonna give it a 7.5, and we'll dig into why. So, but that's where I'm at. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for me, 7.5. What about you, Adrian?
Well, the first one was the best for me, only because it was an introduction to the team.
Yeah.
2, and this one I'll give it about the same. I would say 4.5 to a 5.
Got it.
To me, and maybe some of the audience might not understand straight to DVD, but this could have been a straight to DVD movie for me. So
got it. And I do think it was a lot. The tone was a lot more serious, right? Mm-hmm. We still had the comic relief throughout, but I don't think it wasn't as heavy as the first two. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem. There was some scenes where I felt like it felt a little forced. Like there was some, where there's some near death teases, and then. All of a sudden, seconds later, we're making jokes. That kind of stuff always rubs me the wrong way.
Right. Understood.
But I do think overall it was a much more serious tone. Now, you were right because you did not predict any deaths. No, I did. I said right here, I said that Rocket would die and maybe Drax. And, I mean, we didn't get that Rocket was teased, the death of Rocket, right. Which was really like the whole plot or the beginning of the film was just based off of that. Mm-hmm. And then Drax, I think we got a quick tease too. There was a part where he was damaged pretty badly, but even that, it's still, no one died.
Even Nebula, she had some blood thrown up there moment there.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't realize how easily she snapped back. Like some of that was it was a little cool, but a
Right,
little odd, right? So I mean, with that being said, let's just get right into it. Go through kind of what we remember of the film, and I do like, I like the beginning. I like the whole, the setting, the nowhere, the planet, if you will, which I guess is a celestial head, right? These big creatures that the celestial. Now, did you see Eternals?
I did.
Okay. So I think that wasn't that our first time in the MCU where we got exposed to these celestials, these godlike.
I'm not sure, but that was the first time that I remember seeing.
Okay, same.
And again with Marvel, that's my experience. These, planet-sized, beings. But so, yeah,
Got it. And another thing, we won't get into this much today, but there's a part in that movie, The Eternals, where that celestial kind of pops out of the ocean.
right.
And we've still not addressed that, like in any other movie. Like all these things are happening. The Black Panther 2 happened, Doctor Strange, and no one has even said like, yo, what about that big ass head that popped out of the ocean, a few years ago?
Right. You got these Himalayan mountain-sized fingers sticking up out of the ocean and a half a head, and maybe they'll address it in another better Eternals.
Yes, maybe. But I guess that's been at least my experience with these Celestials. But Nowhere, we've been to Nowhere before. I believe in both Guardians movies, definitely in the first one, and then in Infinity War, one of the stones, I can't remember right now which one, was on Nowhere when the Guardians show up late. Thanos was already there, and he uses the Reality Stone to make it seem like he wasn't, but it was all torn apart.
Right.
But basically, Guardians make this celestial head now their house. I mean, where they are their world, pretty much.
Yep.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
It was. You kind of get the scale of it because at the end of the movie they bring pretty much everything off the high evolutionary ship, which is a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Considering that there's already people there.
Right.
So this is a large craft, and it's a spaceship. It's not just
True.
a head floating around.
Which we didn't know till the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that was impressive.
Yeah. So I do like that. But they set the setting of it. They walk through. There's music playing. We're kind of following Rocket right throughout this, and it's like everyone's pretty much happy.
Right.
It's they're hanging. I like they're hanging the Guardians of the Galaxy sign.
Right.
But it's in their foreign language.
Right.
But the style is exactly the same.
Right. Well, it was in both. The bigger part of the sign was the foreign language, but then they had Guardian of the Galaxy underneath.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So I thought that was cool. So we just get they bring you up to speed with what everyone's doing, and we get to see pretty much all the Guardians throughout this opening scene, and then we get to Star-Lord. We get to Peter Quill. He is at the bar.
Hold on, before you go on, you might want to tell them about the spoiler alerts.
Oh yeah, shit. You know what?
Everything in here.
Right. Hey, in case you haven't figured it out, this is a Guardians of the Galaxy review. So there are going to be spoilers. We're going to spoil the entire film because we're going to review it. This is not going to be a spoiler-free review. So if you've not seen the movie yet, hit pause, go watch it, come back. Or if you don't mind spoilers, then just stay with us for the ride. But good point. So yeah, spoilers everywhere. So when we first meet Star-Lord or get kind of find what he's up to, he's getting drunk. He's wasted. Rocket goes in. They have some little dialogue. You could tell they're kind of not on the same page, right? And then Nebula ends up carrying Star-Lord out. So I think that was a tease in the previews, if you remember.
It was.
Right?
It was. I was kind of disappointed with that because I thought there was some death involved.
Yeah.
Instead of some drunken dude, but it made sense. I was actually impressed more with Nebula being able to just effortlessly carry
like
this
nothing.
dude.
Yeah.
Right? But it made sense considering she's pretty much most machine.
Absolutely. And I think, we discussed briefly last week about sometimes with these Marvel movies, they spoil the entire movie in the trailer. But I like when they do stuff like that where they head fake us.
Right. Definitely a mix up. Yeah.
Yeah. So she carries him out. And we realize obviously he's in this dark depression because, essentially, what all it boils down to is he lost what he believed was like the love of his life, right? Him and Gamora in the past movies, he ended up, becoming a thing, right? And then his Gamora was sacrificed in Infinity War by Thanos, and then in Endgame we get this from the past Gamora, right? She comes, but the Gamora that we are now seeing in Guardians, she doesn't really know the Guardians,
Right.
Like if you remember when she first met Peter Quill, they were in that I don't know, some damage like ship, and she knees him in the nuts right twice. Like
exactly.
That was, and then she's like, "This was the guy." I love that scene. Nebula's
Right.
like, "Well, the choices were him or a tree." So that's the Gamora we're dealing with. That's why Star-Lord is depressed and down. And Adam Warlock shows up like right off the bat.
Right.
What'd you think about him showing up that quick?
It made sense considering what Rocket had done.
Yes.
In the beginning, one of my first thought was, why is this dude attacking Rocket? But then you go back to the previous movies, and it's because Rocket stole the batteries.
Yep, freaking Rocket,
which is
batteries.
their precious commodity on that planet. So that made sense.
Yeah.
So.
No. And he shows up just kicking everybody's ass. Like blasts Rocket, and this is where, that the beginning of the film where Rocket's now basically on like life support, right?
Right.
But I thought there were some pretty good fight scenes there. Like him and Nebula got into it pretty well.
Right.
And he destroyed Groot. We see Groot's head cut off.
Right. Drax.
Yep, Drax gets pretty banged up.
Yep.
Like it was so we immediately they established that we don't know much about Adam Warlock, but we know he's powerful as shit. Like he's gonna come in and wreck shit. And he does.
Well, the fact that they dumbed him down
Yeah.
is probably good in this movie because he is, from what I understand. I mean, and Adam Warlock was one of those characters where, I knew about him in the past, but I didn't really follow him, so I don't know, the full extent of his powers.
Yep.
But it's good that they dumbed him down in order for the Guardians of the Galaxy to even be able to go toe-to-toe with him for as long as they did.
Yeah.
I mean, he should have just went in and just, split that head in half.
Right.
And, took out Rocket immediately.
Yeah.
So, it's good the way they portrayed it. He's kind of like less powerful.
I think they had to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I buy the explanation, right? He's essentially he was woken up from his cocoon a little early.
Right.
So he is the equivalent of a kindergartner. Like
Right.
he's 5 years old, and he's got these powers though.
Mhm.
So I guess in a lot of aspects he behaves like a 5-year-old would with these powers. Like he don't know what the hell.
Right.
His mom's telling him to kill things he don't really want to, and then
Right.
I love this scene too where they're interrogating the guy.
Right.
And he just melts him. He's like,
Right.
I don't know. Like you told me to show him.
And he had this like look on his face, like he's so proud.
Yeah.
You know, I did this for my mom, kind of a deal. And she's
Yep.
like, dude, what? I didn't ask you to do that.
Right.
You know.
You know what I got just now talking about it? Subtle. You seen The Boys?
The boy. Yes.
Yes. Subtle Homelander vibes from him at times.
Right.
Because
right.
Homelander is that character who, same thing, was not same, but created in a lab similar.
Right.
He's got this Superman type of skill, of power level,
Mhm.
right? But he's a child, like because he's not. He was created in a lab somewhere and just thrown out there.
Right.
And
well, they kind of he does kind of have a backstory, but he's just psychotic.
yeah,
Homelander just
he's just
psychotic.
like yeah.
Now, a little off, but speaking of Homelander, that character, I always thought that he would be the perfect Wolverine replacement.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
the actor. I see it.
you know,
I can
he's
see it.
short like Wolverine's supposed to be.
Yes.
right.
Yep.
He has the smile. He already has the teeth almost.
Yeah.
You know, Star, I think his name is.
Yes. Yep.
I
Yeah.
always
Anthony
thought,
Starr.
Yeah,
Yep.
I always thought that he would play like the perfect Wolverine.
Wow.
You know, because Hugh Jackman is what 6'4",
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep.
I mean, again, an iconic portrayal
Right.
of a Marvel character, but he's kind of off on the fact that he's probably 3 feet taller than
Exactly.
the comic book
Yeah.
Wolverine.
Yeah. That's
But
a
anyway.
good point. Yeah. He does look the part. So anyways, we get into this, we understand, or at least we think initially that, Adam Warlock's going to be the villain, right?
Right.
Based off of that. And now he is a villain, but he's not the main villain. We have the High Evolutionary, which we've never really been exposed to before.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of, we get this Rocket origin told through flashbacks, which
Mm-hmm.
I think was one of the highlights of that film.
Oh, absolutely. They did a very good job. That was, heartstring pulling kind
Yeah.
of things that went on with Rocket. So that was very good to see. That was a very well executed storyline.
Yeah. Yeah, it made you kind of feel for Rocket when, we're talking about Guardians 2. In the second movie, Rocket was pretty much a dick
Right.
to everybody.
Right.
All he cared about was the batteries and just trying to, just get his pretty
Right.
much and move on. Like he was a jerk throughout that
Right.
film.
Right.
So this was kind of like his redemption, But you're right, it did tug on the heartstrings, if you will. Made you care about the character a lot more.
Absolutely.
And I've seen some comments. James Gunn went on Twitter a couple of days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, and he was like, "Ask me any question, but 2 rules: it has to be a yes or no, and it has to be related to Guardians of the Galaxy 3." So they were just shooting off a bunch of stuff, and they asked him. They said, "Was Rocket always one of your favorite Guardians?" And he said yes. Like, was he meant to be the main character? So, and I guess we saw it here. We saw that this director's love for this character, because I mean the story that he told was based off of that. But I do like the origin, and then it sets up this High Evolutionary, as this villain kind of in the background.
Right, correct.
And he when we first see him, he's just like a regular dude, right? Haircut, all the good stuff. And then when we see him, kind of like real time, it looks like he's got like a facelift gone bad, right?
Right.
And we don't really know what happens there for a while.
Yeah, but I like the way. Also, I like the way they executed that. But that's later in the movie.
Yeah.
But it was just some things that when the opening scene, when they came out and Adam Warlock attacked and Rocket's injured. It's interesting how they made him the most critically injured out of all the ones that got their ass beat.
Yeah.
But then these emergency packs they pull out,
these
the
med
drawer,
kits,
whatever those things were.
Yeah, someone goes get the med kit. I'm like, what the hell's a med kit? This would have been helpful when Tony Stark was dying in Endgame, or Aunt May. I mean, shit, we could have saved Aunt May with these, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, but the assumption is, I guess, these guys are flying around the universe, just like they found the head and moved in.
Right.
They are going to pick up technology along the way, but it was just kind of odd.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of reminds me of some stuff we see in Star Wars where they just make up shit for the plot. And then I've always felt, I don't know about you, but I've always felt like these Guardians movies are Marvel's version of Star Wars. And I would say that if I'm looking at it that way, I would say Marvel does Star Wars better than Star Wars does Star Wars movies right now. Just lately,
I can see that. Well, Marvel does movies better than DC has ever done movies.
True. Yeah. Yep. So far. Hopefully that will change at some point. But, because But anyway, so Rocket's he's severely injured. Nebula kind of saves the day a little bit with more. She stabs him through like the back or whatnot, and then he we don't see him. He goes back home to heal. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about Adam Warlock. I actually kind of dug into his character this past week just to kind of learn who he was before I watched the movie. And what I read about him was he's this guy in the comics who always just shows up at an unexpected time and pops in, pops out a lot. Obviously, I knew about his power. I knew how strong he was just based off the little exposure I had. But I also read that he tends to die often and come back. And something about him coming back, he's more mature, more strong or whatnot. So I actually thought that was going to be a part of this movie. So when she first stabbed him, I thought, this is going to be his first death, which it wasn't. But he did. So he didn't necessarily die, but I feel like he did go back and heal and come back maybe even a little stronger. I don't know.
Well, I mean, but that was kind of the theme of the movie across the all the scenes.
Yeah.
This was a movie of resurrection.
Yeah.
Drax get critically injured, looks like, but then he comes back. Nebula, she's coughing up blood, but she doesn't really die.
Right.
She gets her head like twisted off, but she's still shooting in the same thing.
Yes. Yes.
Ratchet. Obviously the movie was about him.
Yep.
Drax, he gets kind of wiped out a little bit, and then even Star-Lord. So there were teases throughout the movie. This whole resurrection theme. So the one that actually could do it didn't demonstrate it as much as everybody else did. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It was almost like we were talking offline earlier. It was like you said, it was like about second chances. It's kind of, and it was throughout, right? Like even, Star-Lord's trying to get this, I guess, second chance with Gamora because first Gamora's gone, and so I appreciated that Gamora variant, if you will. Like it was, because we're so used to the Gamora who's a thing with Star-Lord in these movies,
right?
And even though that happened in Endgame, but we've not really seen the Guardian since then.
Right.
So to have this, I not that I obviously going into it, I knew that she was Gamora from the past, but I didn't expect that to be so heavy throughout the film. And I thought it was a plus.
Well, I mean, I didn't like it at first, but at the end, when you see how it wraps up, it kind of makes sense because the end wouldn't have ended the way it did if they had stayed in a relationship.
Yeah.
But what I did see was that it really played on family. You know,
yes, yes.
She got to saw the Guardians of the Galaxy as a family unit from the outside.
Yeah,
and then at the end we get to see her embrace her new family with the Ravagers.
Right.
So that was those were cool moments.
Yeah, I did like that. One of my favorite scenes. We're talking about tugging on heartstrings, and when Gamora's basically like she's done. She doesn't want to save her. She just wants to get out.
Right.
And Nebula's like, they're kind of arguing back and forth or whatnot, and then Gamora looks at it and goes, "Well, I'm family."
Mm-hmm.
And then Nebula looks at her and go, "Well, he is too."
Right.
And now it's like, oh, that's awesome, because it like to your point, Gamora's now seeing like, oh shit, this is a family here without me,
right?
And this is real. They actually, because she is like, why do y'all care about this damn badger? I think she kept calling them
rat, right?
Yeah, but it's like he's their family,
right? But that also kind of pissed me off when she sent out that signal.
Yes,
and she should have known immediately that she wasn't talking to one of her team.
I know.
If their family was so close knit,
right?
She should have known immediately that she was talking to somebody else.
I did find that a little odd,
and then that leads them, directly to their location,
right? Which
started all this other bullshit.
Yes, you know. But I guess it wouldn't be a Guardians movie if they weren't running from freaking everybody, right? Like it's kind of so. I think that one thing I do. I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it, but another thing that I loved about it it felt like a Guardians movie. I think sometimes when you get these multiple, sequels and stuff, they kind of start getting off the path. But this, even though it wasn't as funny as some of the other ones, but it still felt very much Guardians.
Well, again, like we talked about, offline a little bit, it's like, so you got a recipe for something. So let's take food, right?
Yeah.
You bake this cake or you make this steak a certain way. Do you know why people keep asking for it? Because you make it consistently all the time.
Right.
I don't care what the sides are. Just give me that one thing that I like, consistently. Don't go trying to add some foreign ingredient to the movie, which it seems like they try to do sometimes.
Yeah.
It's too funny or always funny.
Right.
Or they bring in something that doesn't make sense, and so they change in the recipe. They know what the proper recipe is, but they want to try to change the recipe. Just come up with a good storyline. And I think this Rocket story was a very good storyline. I like the family side to it.
Yeah.
So that made it a good movie to me.
Right.
Not all this extra stuff that they try to throw in.
Right. Yeah, I think you remember that show on MTV, Pimp My Ride?
Yes.
I think sometimes these studios and even especially Marvel, they got what I call Pimp My Ride syndrome. Mm-hmm. So what that is Thor Ragnarok, for example. Mm-hmm. I love that movie. Right. One of my favorite movies in the MCU. One of these days we'll rank our total movies. Maybe we'll do a movie by movie review or something. But that one ranks up high for me.
Right.
It was dramatic. It had the emotional. I mean, Odin dies in it, right? Thor loses the hammer. His sister comes back, loses an eye. I mean, hit the whole dynamic with him and Loki. It's funny throughout. You know, Hulk being one of my favorite characters. Actually, next week we should do top 5 characters of all time.
Sounds good.
We'll just list them. So sidebar. Next week we're going to discuss that. But Hulk, Hulk's in it, and I think that's probably where Hulk's best appearance throughout the MCU. Mm-hmm. And it was funny throughout, but it wasn't too much, right? So this is why I say Pimp My Ride syndrome. Here's what Marvel does. They go, they really like the humor in that movie. You know what we should do? We should add more humor.
Right.
It should be from the minute you start to the minute you end. We should just laugh the entire time. But then you lose the stakes.
Yep.
Then you lose the emotion behind it. I mean, we discussed this last week with, Mighty Thor. Jane Foster's dying, but everything's a joke.
Right.
And I feel like I call that Pimp My Ride syndrome. They think like, hey, you like fish, Adrian? I'm gonna take your car and put some fish tanks in your car. You're like, dude, but I need to drive my car to work. It's like, oh, then we're gonna put fish tanks in the dashboard and in the trunk and in the side panels. Like, well, now I can't even use my damn car. But thanks. Like, I just want the fish in my house.
Right.
So like, I just want the comedy where it makes sense. I don't want it at every part of the movie.
Agreed.
So I think with Guardians, I think they figured out that mix.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I will say, my opinion, where they didn't figure out that mix was the soundtrack.
Agreed. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't understand how a kid that left Earth when he was 5 or 8 or something like that.
Yeah.
Now he has from 1956 to 2000 music soundtrack,
right.
and the Beastie Boys song was just odd.
Yeah, the placement did not make sense.
It was just odd. And they tried to make kind of like they did with the comedy.
Yeah.
In like Thor, they tried to make the soundtrack the overbearing thing in this movie, and it didn't work.
No,
it didn't work, especially that one song.
Yeah, that was a miss. And I think too, with the tone of the movie, I don't think it needed music because it was too much. Every scene had a song to it, right? And I feel like in the first two Guardians movies, or even some of their appearances in the Avengers movies, the music made sense. It wasn't too much. You know, Guardians, first time they show up in Infinity War in the ship, their music's playing. That makes sense. But these are times like in the middle of fights, people are dying, all this crazy shit going on, and it's just, you know, we're like, hey, just press play. Like, I feel like at some point, like James Gunn is just trying to, like, you know, flex his musical catalog that he has at home or something. Like, I get it. We know you're a fan of classic rock tunes, dude, but just like a lot of these we don't even know. I don't anyway.
And again, this movie was about Ratchet, not Star-Lord.
Rocket.
I mean, I say Ratchet.
Ratchet, yeah. I like that. Let's change his name to Ratchet.
Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah.
It was about Rocket, not about Star-Lord.
True.
So all those variants of the music and stuff shouldn't have even been in there.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's me.
Yeah. So anyways, you know, Adam Warlock comes in, destroys a bunch of shit, and then we realize that you know, Rocket's in this, you know, he's like in the ICU, right? He's in critical condition. You talked about the med kits. They try to strap one on him. It backfires, and then I think it was it Nebula who maybe came in and was like, whoa, y'all
take it off, yeah,
because that we find out he's got this like kill switch on his heart, right?
Right.
And we don't know a lot about his backstory at this point, but we do know he was like someone created Rocket.
Correct.
Right. So, I mean, is this kill switch there? I guess it makes sense, right?
I mean, so since Rocket was created by the High Evolutionary, you know, if you think back to like Tony Stark, right? When he creates his suits, he always know where his suit is.
Right.
You know, when Batman create viruses and tech or software, he has a callback home feature, so he always knows where his stuff is.
Right.
So to me, you know, the bomb strapped to his heart made sense for the High Evolutionary to put it in.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that it's a bomb shows, you know, his psychosis.
Yes.
You know, he'd rather destroy it than to just know what it is, where it is, you know. Which, surprisingly, he didn't know where Rocket was at any point.
Right.
He just wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep. Maybe it was out of range, you know, like your Wi-Fi signal only goes so far.
Right.
Yeah, but so when we get to this point, we realize like this is going to start the movie pretty much right now. They have to find the solution to this, and you know, at this point, what they're thinking is, okay, there's a kill switch, there's some code that we need to turn off the kill switch, so then we can apply this, you know, heal pack or this med kit and heal Rocket essentially. So that starts the whole. I mean, all the missions and what you know, we talked about the whole Star Wars. Like, to me, this is a Star Wars, Marvel's version of Star Wars. And Star-Lord is like he's like Han Solo to me.
Right.
You know, he's charismatic. He's the hustler, the gambler, the guy who's, you know, always gets out by the skin of his teeth, right? He'll get in some shit, makes it a lot worse for himself, just like Han Solo. His mouth gets him in trouble, but he'll talk his way out of it, right? So we end up, you know, they're going on this mission to find this code. And they end up on this, I guess it's like a planet where it's got, you notice the rings around it?
Right.
So this is like, first of all, it's a weird looking planet. It looks like freaking brain matter or something.
Right.
Which I would not be messing with. So if I was in the Guardians, I'd be like, we turn back, because you get there and they're sticking their hands in like this slime, like putty and stuff to open up the doors and all that shit, which I'd be out, dude. I don't do that stuff. I don't do sticky hands. My kids try to play with slime, like that looks awesome. I don't want to touch it, so that's my own issue.
Right.
But anyway, they break into this facility, and then we see Sylvester Stallone's character. We see him for about like 2 seconds, right?
Right.
Like, why is he in this movie?
They could have picked anybody because you didn't expect to see him.
Nope.
You know, so they could have thrown anybody in at that point.
Right.
And then he doesn't show up again until the end of the movie.
Yeah.
You know, for like, you know, 5 or 6 seconds, you know, a piece.
Right.
So
just like the second movie.
Right. That was waste of money.
Yeah.
From a production standpoint, waste of money.
Yep. I actually thought when we saw him, I was like, oh shit, he's going to be in this movie. That's pretty, because I'm a big fan of Stallone.
Absolutely.
I love Rocky, almost all of them. Like, I love the Creed. I love his part in the Creed movies.
Right.
And just, I'm a big fan of Sylvester Stallone in general. And I'm like, oh shit, he's going to get his doing this movie. Like, no, he's in there, in and out, right?
Right.
But then they get there, and the reason I bring up the Star-Lord Han Solo, I feel like we get to see that in this scene, right? They break into this facility,
right?
And then I like when Drax gets kind of stuck in the hole, right? And then Mantis freaking takes their spacesuits, drops them in this container because they're trying to hide. Because now they're breaking in, and everyone there is aware of it, and they're sending the troops there. They wearing these weird like suits, like. What was up with that?
I don't know what that was about. I don't know if it was comic relief or there was absolutely no reason for them to have those types of suits.
Yeah.
It just looks like a bunch of, I don't know, like bubbles or potatoes stuck together with some engine ports on them.
Right.
I don't know what that was.
Yeah, it was definitely weird. I do like. So the leader of this little crew, you know, when whoever's on the comm calls them up, hey, go check out this area. That's Nathan Fillion. He is he's the voice behind Nathan Drake in the Uncharted series. He's a big voice actor for a lot of games. So when he announced in this movie that we had no idea what his part was. I actually enjoyed his character to an extent. And then when they meet the Guardians, I love that interaction when he realizes like Drax is, an idiot, right? Like,
right. We both got stupid.
Yeah, you got a moron. I got one too.
Right. That was actually a very good comedic scene right there.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that part.
It was, and then there's a call because he does it again in the end of the movie, and I want to say he does it to Adam Warlock.
Yes,
he's like, and it didn't work well there.
Right.
So yeah, we get to see that, and then Mantis throws out, and we see some like dissension between some of these members. Like Nebula's getting frustrated with Mantis. Like she's like, "Can you ever just list like what's wrong with you?" I forget exact, but she's upset with him, and her and Drax are kind of going at it throughout.
Right.
Like they're almost as much. It's funny because I wonder if that's like almost analogous to the fans. Like Nebula is getting fed up with Drax comic relief. Right.
That's a good point. But then, Mantis gets, goes off on Nebula for basically cutting Drax short.
Yes.
Just because, his part in our team as a family is that, he's loyal, he'll always be there, and he's funny.
Right.
As opposed to what you do all the time. So just because you can't tolerate it, that doesn't mean that, he's not valuable to this team.
Which makes it brings that family analogy home because like it seems like a real family.
Yeah.
Real families are not perfect. They have their issues with each other.
They're gonna
argue. One's gonna call the other one out. And so I think Mantis was like that. She's like that mediator, right, between them. So I really like that aspect of it.
The middle child.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
Yep. So I like that piece of it. But then, they get there and they get this basically they're going to this place to steal Rocket's file. Because they believe that file is going to have the key to this code or whatnot.
Right.
And we get to see Star-Lord in action. Because up until this point, he's depressed. He's crying about Gamora. So he almost was like annoying me a little bit. Like, it reminded me a little bit of the Fat Thor from Endgame. Like, he's just, God, really? But then we get to see Star-Lord tries to smooth talk this girl. There's this red being, which actually... When you go back to the first Guardians, you remember he has a girl on his ship that he's kind of like sleeping with or whatever, and then she was red as well. So I don't know if there's any connection with that, but anyway, he's trying to smooth talk her. It's not working.
Right.
And Gamora just comes in guns blazing like, yo, give me the shit. Let's go.
Right.
And then eventually, though, I mean, they go through, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between. We're not going to go through every second of the movie, but basically towards the end of this, they kind of find themselves like at odds, right? They're outnumbered dramatically, and then Star-Lord is trying to smooth talk this girl again.
He wears her down, that's what hustlers do.
Exactly.
You don't like me initially, I'm just going to show up every day and wear you down until you submit. Yep.
And it works, though.
It works.
His charm, and he's pissing Gamora off because what he's saying is, hey, let me get on this speaker because there's a lot of good people out there just like you, and if I can talk to them, we can fix all this and whatever. I'm paraphrasing, but he smooth talks her, and she thinks, okay, he's all right. She sets him up, and he's like, oh, I was just trying to get in the system. And then these funny suits that we're talking about, they had this like some type of motor on the back or whatnot.
Some kind of propulsion system. He taps in and makes them all go flying through the air and whatever.
And then the Guardians get out of it, right? So then they get this little cube or whatnot, but then they find, and this is where they learn about Rocket's origin.
Right.
And if you remember, Mantis was like, wow, this is why he doesn't, talk about it.
Yeah, we have our stuff, but this is messed up. But they do such a very good job of telling, Rocket's story that you actually feel that moment too.
Yeah.
When she says that, you're like, oh shit, I agree. This is messed up.
Because by that point, we as the audience, we've already seen a lot of these flashbacks play out, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, I guess we're the High Evolutionary. Have you ever heard of this character or seen him in anything else prior? Yeah.
When I was reading him in the comics, he was always, because a lot of people are like, well, why does he always mess with animals and stuff? That was his thing.
Yeah.
He had that was his thing.
Got it.
He always tried to take these from the lowest form to the highest form.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why doesn't he mess with like people? I mean, obviously he did.
Eventually.
Eventually, but I mean, he just wanted to, I guess, get the best out of the least. Yeah. Which is why it was his spin on these animals and stuff.
Got it. So you were familiar with him to an extent before seeing it. So I never heard of him. Now I guess what's your take on him? I think, for me, I think he was probably one of the purest evil villains we've seen, right? Because a lot of these other, I think about some of my favorite villains, like you have, Thanos, for example. Thanos, right. The thing that was driving him was to set the universe straight in his mind. Almost like some just borderline Hitler type stuff, right? But his drive was to make sure that there was enough of every resources for everybody. And now you could argue, well, wouldn't you just use the stones and make more resources versus cut out half the people? So that's that sick sadistic. But so you kind of, at least I'm here for listening for your reasoning. This guy is just like, I just want to make the perfect society and destroy everything in my way till we get there. Or even like Killmonger in Black Panther. He believes this is his birthright. He was kind of casted out of Wakanda. He is a Wakandan, so why shouldn't he fight for the throne? Which I could get there and go, okay, I see your side of it, dude.
Right.
This dude, I'm like, I don't know that I see your side of it.
No, he was taking species, kidnapping them, doing all this stuff, and just trying to mash them all together to do whatever he thought was right. Yeah. But it wasn't just, the living things. It was the technology. It wasn't just, other beings. It was like, even the people that worked with him or worked for him. I mean, he was trying to make everything better, and it was just a level of psychosis that I hadn't seen in a movie. Right. Period. That's more than a comic book movie.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And then they find that the code is not, like, someone removed it from the file, right? So then they go on this other hunt, and it ends up leading them, and I'm sure we're skipping through some stuff, but it leads them to Counter Earth.
Correct.
Which is a planet that High Evolutionary created, and how he populated what's called Counter Earth. How he populated that was through something Rocket helped him uncover, right? Because he engineered Rocket, and then from there he's trying to speed up evolution on some other animals, and he's trying to recreate Rocket, essentially, right? So he brings Rocket down, and I love how we get to see Rocket kind of grow up, like there's all these different phases, and he tries it with a turtle, and he evolves them. Turtle gets, it almost looks like, my daughter looks, she's like, is this Ninja Turtles? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. And it looks like some weird Ninja Turtle, but it's aggressive, angry, and then they incinerate him. Long story short, Rocket ends up solving this puzzle for him, right?
Right.
Now, where like, Rocket he's a genius, right? This character, I guess, where would you rank him? Like, would you put him above? Because think about the geniuses we have in the MCU or we've seen on screen. Tony Stark.
Yep.
We've seen Bruce Banner.
Yep.
Shuri.
Yep.
I mean, T'Challa's sister.
Yep.
Those are probably the three biggest. I don't know if there's anything you think I'm leaving out that we've seen so far.
Reed Richards.
Okay.
There's another, let me see, in the second Black Panther, the girl that makes the Iron Man looking suit.
Oh yes, Riri. Yeah, right? Riri Williams.
So she's up there.
Yeah.
Frank Richards, Reed Richards' son.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got like godlike power. He's like almost omnipotent kind of deal. So yeah, there's a lot of high-end, highly intellectuals.
Yeah.
In these
of the ones we've seen on screen though, where would you place Rocket? Would you put him up there? Was he above Tony? Below?
No, I wouldn't put him above Tony.
Yeah.
I would say Tony Stark and Reed Richards go back and forth.
Got it.
Because they both come up with some stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, when Tony solved the whole time thing.
I know.
You know, and Reed Richards, you know, he has, you know, right down the hall and you open the bedroom door and he's got interdimensional, you know, transports and stuff like that. So also Dr. Victor Von Doom.
Yeah.
He's up there too.
Yes.
You know.
Who's been rumored for this multiversal war. We've not seen him yet, but there's been plenty of rumors that he's going to be part of this.
I hope they got to get that the cast right. They got to get it right. Even if they pull some, you know, some Deadpool Ryan Reynolds thing where he's behind the mask most of the time with a voiceover. Yeah. But that whole they got to get that persona right for them to pull off a Doom.
Absolutely.
Because Doom is just badass, dude.
Yep. I love, you know, talking about Rocket being a genius. There was an Endgame where him and Tony kind of meet for the first time, and he's like, "This whole time I thought you were Build-A-Bear," and they're going back and forth. And then he's like, "Hey, remember, you're only a genius on Earth." Like,
right.
So he's got a whole different perspective. But I mean,
absolutely.
Anyway, regardless of where you rank him, he's up there.
He's
a genius, and I think we really got to see the extent of it with this movie, how he solves that issue where, and I forget, you know, the way something about something was being compressed where that was causing these guys to evolve and not get that other
something
trait.
With the chamber.
Yes.
The chamber was causing them to evolve erratically.
Yeah. And then we see this shift, though, with the high, because you would think that the High Evolutionary created Rocket. He's now solving. It's like that parent that doesn't want their kid to do better than them.
Right.
And that's kind of the vibe. Like, he's like, oh, shit, how could you figure this out and I can't? He was almost angry.
No, he was not almost
angry.
True,
yeah.
He was irate.
Yes.
You know, at the fact that something that he created was able to solve a problem that he, the creator, was not.
Yeah.
So he was definitely irate. But you also got to understand that, you know, the High Evolutionary created, he built Rocket, basically, out of tech. So I'm sure that has something to do with, you know, his intelligence. But these other creatures, he evolved.
Yeah.
So there was no tech involved in him.
Right.
So, but I mean, he was irate.
Yep.
Completely off the chart with this dude.
Yeah. And then that's through what he learned from Rocket. That's how he created these beings for this planet, this counter Earth.
Right.
So we get there. You know, the Guardians show up and they just, you know, I love how they just land their ship like in somebody's neighborhood.
Right, over the houses, you know.
And then they don't speak the same language, right? Which I actually like. I think sometimes with these space things, like we go to every planet speaks English. Like it's just every planet out there. They know. Well,
notice when they got to the High Evolutionary's ship and the kids was talking a language that they didn't think that they could understand. And Mantis said, that language is not in my database or something like that.
Right.
So they have translators.
Yes.
But they just happen to run across this language that, you know, Drax knew.
Yeah.
But that they hadn't come across before, so they couldn't translate. So the understanding in these type of movies is that they have some kind of universal translation, like in Star Trek, you know, that's not worth mentioning.
Right.
But they probably should.
Yeah. Makes sense. But they get to this planet and they can't communicate.
Right.
And there's like this face-off, and I think maybe it's Star-Lord going, hey, we're not here to hurt you or whatever. And then the girl throws the ball at Drax, and Drax just pegs that, or the little child pegs the child with the ball.
Right.
Knocks it over. Like,
see, that part I didn't kind of get the whole, well, other than to make them angry at him.
Yes.
But the girl didn't really throw the ball.
No.
She just kind of dropped it, and it like ran over to Drax, and then Drax picked it up and hit her in the face with it, you know, axe to the face kind of deal.
Which is kind of on par for Drax. He never knows what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
I did like the ongoing Zarg nuts, like how they brought that back, and it was just there.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah.
That was funny.
And then he goes, Mantis is like, how do you know I didn't want a Zarg nut? He goes, too late, they're all gone.
Right.
Then he reaches in.
Right.
Like,
right.
This is perfect, Drax. But they end up meeting this family that kind of brings them in, right? They can't really communicate, but they're looking for the character that has the earpiece that they believe he stole the code. And then she points to this big ship. That's where they are, right? So they end up, like most movies, they confiscate somebody's car.
Of course.
And this part was funny. This was the first F-bomb that we got in Marvel in, 10, 15 years. Like, actual, there's been, like, stuff bleeped out, but this was, did you like that car scene?
I did. I liked the car scene, and I liked the fact that they didn't start out with the F-bomb.
Yeah.
They kind of led up to it. There was other couple of, you know, softer curse words, if there's such a thing as a softer curse word, right?
Yeah.
Well, there is, because the F-bomb is the F-bomb.
Yeah.
So they kind of led you up to it. They kind of, you know, paved the path for that F-bomb. So that was a very good scene, I think. But that also got me looking at Nebula a little bit. I think her makeup, and this is kind of like off, but
yeah,
her makeup wasn't as techy. It looked more painted on than it did as opposed to attachments.
You know what? Something felt off about her, and I couldn't figure it out. But now that you point that out, I agree. It did not. You're right. She looked more like a robot in the past movies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you could attribute it to upgrades, per se.
True.
You know, like the arm and all that kind of stuff. But then something she grabbed to add onto her as opposed to transform in. Like the arm was a transformation, but that thing that when Adam Warlock attacked Rocket, she went in and grabbed that and put it on her back so she could fly.
True.
So, but anyway, but yeah, the car scene was cool.
Yeah. Is it like, she's trying to, Star-Lord's in there, and he's, of course, he's got it. He's Han Solo. He's got to figure it out, right? Like, I got it. Come on, get in. And then she can't get the damn door open. He's like, press the little button. He's like, not the keyhole. And then finally he gets so irritated. He's like, open the fucking door.
Right.
Like, wow, we actually got it. Like, that was cool. Took us a long time. But
it was natural. It made sense in that moment in order to say that.
Yes.
It wasn't just, off the cuff like the emergency packs or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't forced like, hey, we got this F-bomb approved, let's just throw it out here. Right. It made sense. I like, to your point, they built up to it. And then they end up getting to this ship, right? Mm-hmm. And then Nebula has to wait outside because she is a weapon, right? And then they bring in, Star-Lord, and I forget who is with him in the ship. It's Star-Lord and
Groot.
Groot, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just them two.
Right.
And we saw some pretty cool fight scenes with them, like when Groot has all the blasters.
Yep.
That was pretty cool.
Yep. They left Nebula out because she was a weapon, but they missed all of his weapons.
Exactly.
And Groot. So Groot had all these weapons inside of his body.
Yeah.
And he came out with bombs and blasters and all kinds of shit.
And then in this, this big ship, they discover this race of people that High Evolutionary is creating. These kids, to your point, the ones that didn't speak the language.
Right.
They're all, hundreds of them just stashed below. And I think then we realize how jacked up, he's pretty jacked up, but this is like a whole nother level because I forget who points it out, but he's like, you have these people and they're killing each other. Like they're still doing the same shit.
Right.
They're not the perfect race. Mm-hmm. And that's when he kind of unveils his other plan is to wipe that whole planet out.
Well, he doesn't unveil a plan. He just executes because it was Star-Lord. He was like, well, the perfect race doesn't mug, elephants or octopus doesn't mug, whatever in the alleys.
Like, yeah, you're right.
He's like, yeah, you're right. And he just immediately executes.
Yeah.
The ship starts coming up. And this is where Adam Warlock looked the most odd to me. By odd, I mean the cast wasn't the best fit for that character. Yeah. He's flying through the air trying to get to his mom before the planet blows up. And it just shows to me how they just need to do better, character casting.
Yeah.
Like Boseman, perfect Black Panther.
Right.
The kid that did play Firestorm in the Fantastic Four, he found his character in Captain America, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Tony Stark as the Iron Man. Those people, they were cast very well, but this Adam Warlock guy, it just didn't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they made him a moron, to begin with, and 5 years old. They took him out of incubation too soon. Sure, that makes him childlike, not just moronic.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I think that I guess I was surprised that Adam Warlock was used for comic relief. I didn't think, just based off of what we saw in the previews and what we know about him from the comics, I was surprised at that. But yeah, to your point, him being about 5 years old, I guess I can tolerate some of it. But but also, it was very early on where I realized, he's going to join the Guardians at some point. Mm-hmm. Because he wasn't the true villain of the film. And so we get to this kind of big, like the end was like most Marvel movies, giant battle, all kinds of stuff going on. Groups of cat, which I like how I like the pairings that they had. Like I like Nebula, Drax, and Mantis being together the whole time. Like that made sense. And then we got some things that kind of came full circle. So to your point last week about it being a send off, like there was this dysfunction between Nebula, Mantis, and Drax the whole time. And the kids that you were talking about, where they thought they just only knew one word, and then eventually Drax starts talking to them and calms them down. And then Nebula's like, well, why didn't you tell me that you spoke that language? And he just goes, why didn't you ask?
Right. Speaking of the kids, remember there was a scene where this girl was running around in a circle like a hamster, right?
Yeah.
She is actually a very powerful character in Marvel Comics as well, and she also ends up as part of the new Guardians team at the end.
Really?
Yeah. She was one of the ones also at the end.
Okay. So I didn't pick up on that. Yeah. Wow. Yep. I mean,
but she's young now, but she actually grows to be a very powerful, because we'll get to the end, but she grows up to be a very powerful entity in Marvel Comics.
Got it. Wow. So I like that. I like when there's stuff that's teasing that everybody knows.
Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think that point with Nebula and Drax, it was almost like then, it showed Nebula that these things that Mantis was saying about her is true. Like she talked about how she kind of judges, always looks for the worst in everybody, cuts them down.
Right.
And you had no faith in Drax. You looked at him as a moron the whole time.
Right.
It's kind of like that, that old saying, like, if you judge a fish by its ability to walk, well, of course but you try to breathe underwater, right? Like, this thing's less than me. Yeah, but you try to do what they're doing. So there was kind of a little bit of that with the Guardians, right? Drax is very literal, but you think he's a moron.
Well, he's a weapon.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yep. And then he shows that he does have some skills you don't know about, but you just never gave him a chance. And then we got to see Drax. Like, I think obviously they're retiring the Drax character, and it comes full circle with he now has this race of kids that he's a father figure to,
right?
Which I liked.
Yeah. That gives him a proper send off in your mind as it relates to the movie, because if they're sunsetting these people, what is Drax going to do?
Right.
Fight monsters for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So I think they did a proper send off for him, that he's going to become this father figure with Nebula.
Yeah.
Because in your mind it gives you something for him to do.
Right. Yeah. So we don't need to see him, but we know that's what he's off doing. Right. And then through towards the end of this movie, we get to see Rocket's escape. Right. Because this whole time we're seeing this origin, but we don't know how he gets out. And then through one of these flashbacks, once he realizes that High Evolutionary realizes that Rocket helps him solve this problem, he now has no use for Rocket.
Right.
He wants to study his brain.
Well, he wants to figure out why. There's a scene where High Evolutionary is asking his number one, what is it that they have that Rocket doesn't, or how do they learn?
Yeah.
And it says something about rote memory. That almost went over my head. The only reason I know about it is because all these studies and stuff that we're doing. But basically what he wanted to do was reproduce what was in Rocket's head in all of his other creations. So
because he was saying that they've not, even the one that you're talking about running on the hamster wheel, they still have not been able to create anything new. I guess the lid of their intelligence was his intelligence, right? So Rocket was the only one that was able to do more than what was put in him, essentially. So he wants to study his brain for that. And then in that flashback scene, Rocket thinks he's going to this new world. Talking about tugging on your heartstring. He thinks he's going to this new world, and he just laughs in his face like, "Oh, you, like little rodent, you think you're coming to my perfect world? Oh, hell no, you're a mess. Like I used you."
Right, but the thing about it is that he's envious of him for his intellect.
Yeah,
but his appearance isn't such that he would allow him in this new world.
Right.
So there's like a contradiction just in his perception of Rocket.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then that sense, I mean, Rocket, we learn, in the beginning of the movie, when we follow Rocket into his room, he takes his key card device that I don't think we've ever seen in Marvel, and he slides in his pocket.
Right.
And we don't see that again until later. And then we realize that he collected parts.
Right.
He was plotting this escape.
Yeah,
they're all hidden throughout his cage.
Right. And on him. That key card put together was almost like what was it, the second Iron Man, when Tony flew down to his building and he's walking and the suit is coming off of him.
Yes.
It was almost like reminiscent of that.
Right.
So he's just kind of like grabbed these parts from everywhere, put this thing together, and it slide and works perfectly. So.
Yeah. Now, something about Rocket, he's raised with these beings or these creatures, and they're all like bits and pieces and parts. And I wonder, like, Rocket's had this fascination with I guess these weapons, number one, right?
Tech and
weapons, and like artificial body part. Like when I think back to Infinity War, one of my favorite scenes of Infinity War is when Thor, Groot, and Rocket show up in Wakanda. Right? He gets Stormbreaker for the first time, and Thor comes through and he's just wrecking shit, right? And then you got teenage Groot. He's shooting up rockets. You know, he's on rockets. Rockets on Groot's back. They're shooting up, and he meets Bucky for the first time. Bucky's got the mechanical arm. And Rockets, and he sees his gun. He's like, "That's a nice gun. Like, I want one of those." He's like, "You ain't having." He's like, "What about that arm?" He's like, "Off limits or whatever." And he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna get that arm." And we actually see. You've not seen the Guardians Christmas special? No. It's fun. It's entertaining. We've watched it with the kids a bunch of times. But there's a scene in there where Nebula gifts Rocket a Winter Soldier arm, like for Christmas. It's at the end of the movie, and so it brings that point full circle. So, do you think part of Rocket's fascination with these body parts and these tech tools has anything to do with his first friends, right? We had we had Teefs, the walrus, we had it was an otter, Lily, and then Floor, right?
Right.
Do you think it has, because they were like bits and pieces, do you think there's any correlation between the two?
Well, probably. Because like, for example, one of the things that attracted me to like Tony Stark and Mr. Fantastic and even Victor Von Doom is their level of intellect, but also their interest they dabbled in technology.
Yeah.
So, you know, obviously a raccoon isn't naturally going to have an interest in weapon systems, but I think that, you know, by him being built and all this stuff integrated in him, he kind of leaned toward that. So, I mean, it's a pretty cool perspective. Yeah. And it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so we get to see this escape, though. They're getting out, and then, you know, that we see this part where you think Rocket and Lily and some others are going to get out, and then High Evolutionary comes behind and shoots them. Right. Shoots and pretty much kills everyone but Rocket.
Well, he shoots Lily, and you know, she dies first. Yeah, obviously, and then there's some fire with some other. So and then High Evolution comes in, and Rocket just dismantles his face. Just dismantles his face, and then his guards come in, and then Rocket and he gets the High Evolutionary's gun. So there's some back and forth fire with these guards, and then when it's done, he looks around and his other friends are gone too. Yeah. So that was another heart tug moment.
Like I mean, that Rocket origin story could have been its own short movie or something. Absolutely. Like with how well it was done.
Absolutely.
I did think it was a little crazy. I mean, I get he's a genius, but he hops in the spaceship and knows how to fly it already. Like that was a little, but you know, I guess we'll just it is. We didn't have enough time, I guess.
Right. I mean, if he can make a key card out of stuff that he's pulling out of his fur, then I mean, I guess he can fly a ship.
We'll go with it. Yeah. But he gets out. But I do like that escape. I thought that was great. And then it kind of comes full circle when he comes back, you know, towards the end of the movie where they're offloading all of these beings, right, to nowhere. Right. Which I think you mentioned earlier. Like, I didn't realize how big nowhere was until they offloaded like hundreds of different people, you know.
Well, hundreds of people and potentially, you know, another hundreds of animals and stuff. Yeah. It's, you know, including those things that Mantis was talking with, you know, the giant like the worms or whatever, like from Dune. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, they offloaded all that, but at that point, because initially they were only going to save like the upper intelligent being or whatever they were, you know, and then because Rocket, you know, he's one of these creatures, he went back and hey, now we're saving everybody, right? But I love the part where, because up until this point, Rocket has never been okay with being called a raccoon, right? I mean, Thor calls him Rabbit. I love that too, like Rabbit. You know, he just goes with it. Maybe he's been called a badger, rodent, all kinds of shit. Right. And then he goes back to this cage and he lets some of these, and he finds a bunch of raccoons essentially in the cage he was in, and baby raccoons, and he realized, oh, this is me. And then he looks over at the cage and it says, you know, species and raccoon. Right. And then he goes with it, you know.
Yep, that was cool. That was a self-realization moment there.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, I mean, we're getting towards the end of the film, right? And then, you know, this big battle going on, and eventually we get to see High Evolutionary is defeated again, right? Yep. And then now this face comes off, and we see the real. Like, I was surprised that we saw that graphic face. Like, you don't really see that stuff in these Marvel movies.
Actually, the face coming off was. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
How they executed that, because he's fighting everybody.
Yeah.
But the kick from what's her face?
Nebula? Or
not Nebula.
Mantis?
No, not Mantis.
No.
Gamora.
Yeah.
So Gamora kicks him or something, and a little piece of the
the
face
little,
starts
yep,
coming off. I thought that was like a wardrobe malfunction.
I did too. Yeah, that they left in.
Yeah, and then Gamora looks at it like sideways, and she starts to peel that stuff off, and it reveals his true face.
Right.
Which was very graphic.
Yep.
I didn't expect that. I expected the F-bomb because everybody was talking about it.
Yes,
but I didn't expect how graphic, the way they made that face look. So that was pretty cool. And I'm also glad with how they executed the reveal, because when Rocket broke out so many years before, he just went off on the High Evolutionary's face, and he was laying in the background. I was wondering why this guy didn't get up, because he has all this power. But he was laying down in the background, and Rocket escaped.
Yeah.
So now you fast forward to that scene where Gamora reveals his face, and now you understand what was happening, during the breakout. So that was good.
Yeah, and I like how they saved it. Like, we didn't see it when it first happened. We get to see it, whatever, years later, right?
Well, because that also ties into his psychosis and his pure hatred for Rocket. Beside the fact that, to some degree, Rocket was probably more intelligent than this guy.
Absolutely.
I mean, he had a very specific knowledge, and his drive, allowed him to do a certain thing. But Rocket had a certain intellect that I think he admired. So besides erasing his face, he was also, obsessed with his, the fact that, he was probably more intelligent than he was.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so they defeat the High Evolutionary, and then they basically this ship of his is now exploding, right? So they're trying to get everybody off. And we get to this point where Star-Lord he's like the last one off for some reason.
Right.
And he drops his MP3 player. He's got to grab the hat, right? And then this is probably why I give it the 7.5. One of the reasons that this part annoyed me. Like, the med kits I can get past. I hear your point. Maybe they just found this, but every other movie, every other scene, or every other instance of seeing Star-Lord on our screen, he's always had these rocket boots.
Yep.
And he's got this mat. That's Star-Lord. Look at the comp, right? So, this scene happens where the ship blows up. Now Star-Lord is in space.
Mm-hmm. Because he's going after this MP3 player.
Because he's got to get his MP3 player.
Right.
He's in space. He starts to freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Star Wars, it reminded me of the Carrie Fisher, the Princess Leia, when she's in The Last Jedi, when she's out in space freezing, and then she all of a sudden uncovers her Jedi powers and flies back. But the dude's frozen, right? He's in space frozen. It got to that point.
Right.
And then Adam Warlock comes out. But, dude, the whole time, Adrian, I'm like, when's he going to flip the mask on?
Right.
Like, when are the boots going to kick on and he's going to fly over there? So I don't, unless I miss something, and if any of y'all watching that, know more than us, let me know if I missed some. Did his boots get stolen? Did they get rid of them? Did he retire them? Like, wear the boots, wear the mask, and why is he just out there freezing? I don't get that.
Well, I think it was like a comedic segue, like Deadpool does about, or Ryan Reynolds does about, the Green Lantern movies and things like that, because Pratt,
yeah.
He used to be a little fat boy, earlier in life, so his face popping out, because I don't know how many space movies have you seen, right? I don't. Your face. I don't know if you explode or implode or whatever, but pretty much all the freezing scenes in space movies I've seen, you just freeze.
Right.
You instantly, your eyeballs, your brain,
it doesn't take as long as it did in the movie.
Right. So first of all, his face blows out.
Yeah.
But backtrack a little bit. So Star-Lord, without his boots, his blasters, and that face mask, that's like Indiana Jones without his whip.
Right.
That's like a Captain America without his shield.
Yep.
That's like Han Solo without his blasters. So all of a sudden they take this stuff out. They introduce tech, and that's fine. You introduce tech that kind of doesn't make sense, but then you exclude things that's probably the core of these characters.
Right.
So that didn't make sense. But I think the only reason that they did that was like comedy relief.
Yeah.
Like a little flash, playing on the fact that he used to be a fat boy.
Yeah.
So they made his face fat.
Yeah.
But then, of course, Adam Warlock comes out. I thought he was going to kind of heal him in space.
Yeah.
But they do this, ET finger touching
yes.
thing, and then he brings them back in. But it's a complete contradiction because Groot, seeing that he's floating backwards now, tries to reach out with his, tree limbs or whatever.
Yeah.
He can't reach him because his tentacles are freezing.
Right.
Right. Yet they can bring Star-Lord in after his face exploding, and he just, kind of like crusty on the outside, kind of a deal.
He's out there for a good 5 minutes. Yeah, Groot can't make it more than 3 seconds, but, shit, Star-Lord's out there just floating around like a human popsicle.
Right.
And then, the point of the ET figure, remind me, I don't know the name of that painting, but you know which one I'm talking about. Where
the Michelangelo thing.
Yeah. So they're touching. I'm like, it looked like they were recreating that for a split second.
I don't know.
And then, Warlock grabs him, and he's flying back like he's, Captain Marvel, because I'm not a big Captain Marvel fan of at least the
Brie Larson version. Yeah.
So I kind of got vibes of like when she shows up and saves Tony and Nebula in Endgame and flies him back. But so he saves the day, right? Ship blows up, and so now we're getting that send off that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's an interesting scene with Groot where for the first time. Well, I guess in the first Guardians movie, we heard him say, "We are Groot," right? But he's still the Groot. I mean, and it's so funny too. Which characters understand Groot? Like when they meet Thor, and he's like, "Oh, I understand Groot. We took it as elective on Asgard." Like that was funny, right? And then throughout, Gamora doesn't understand, but then she starts to learn, right?
Right.
And then there's a scene where he goes, "I love you all," or something like that, right? Like I love all of you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first heard, I was like, "Oh, that's cool," but then I started thinking. Is it Groot saying something different, but Groot's a language, so or is it finally the audience now understands Groot?
Well, I mean, I never really thought about it until you brought that up, but you make a good point because when I saw that, I expected the Guardians to look at him like, oh shit, this dude can say something other than I am Groot. But they didn't do that. They didn't even flinch. So to your point, I think that they're saying in the movies that, okay, if we see Groot again, he's going to be talking in a way that everybody can understand him without the translator, right? Because that probably adds a couple of seconds to the scenes, and they got to think this stuff up. And that's basically it. That we are now going to see the English version of Groot moving forward.
Yeah, which I'd be cool with. I think it's time, and I do like if we're gonna do a send off, and if we are gonna bring some characters back, I think they should be a little different. It should be a different take on them, right? So I mean, speaking of the send off, so we get a handful of them, like Drax and Nebula are now on some other planet, raising basically all the people they saved from the ship. They're now
people and animals.
They're these beings. They're raising this species now, right? Drax is like that father figure, which makes sense. Nebula now accepts Drax and realizes like their strengths and weaknesses kind of play together, I guess, right? Mantis kind of said she wanted to do what she wanted to do. Like she was tired of doing what other people said. Like I said, Drax is retired with Nebula. And then we kind of have this new Guardians group, right? We got Rocket, we got Groot, we got Adam Warlock's now part of the crew.
Right.
We got
that dude, the Mohawk.
Yep, Kraglin's still there.
Right.
And then Cosmo, who just speaking of Cosmo.
I don't get that. I mean, you got this random dog. I mean, it just didn't fit in the movie to me. Again, they just threw that in for a different type of, comedy relief. But a dog in a Russian suit that speaks Russian through a translator, I wasn't feeling that. It made no sense to me.
My thing with that is, and I do think Cosmo is I don't know if Cosmo's in the Guardians comic. I mean, I've seen comics with Cosmo in the past. Not my. I can tell you this: when we do our favorites next week, Cosmo's not going to be on my list of favorites.
Right. Exactly.
But I'm wondering like where the hell does dog come from though? Because she was not in part 2 of Guardians. I don't believe. Maybe I could be blocking out a piece of that. Maybe she was on the planet with Ego. I don't know. But it just kind of showed up.
Right.
Now, I did like the whole good dog, bad dog, like that running joke.
Sure.
I guess the payoff was surprising to me because I thought it was going to be weak. I thought it was just going to be a stupid joke. And then, she comes and kind of saves the day with her telekinesis, smashes the dude with the 2 stones, and then he's like, good dog. So that was a cool payoff, but I don't Kind of like, I read something, Adrian, where the guy was saying if you take Adam Warlock out of this film, you only need to rewrite a couple scenes and it's still the same movie.
I agree.
I kind of feel the same way with Kraglin and Cosmo.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. 3 unessential players in the movie.
Yeah.
Which probably made it a little longer than it should have been.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I only rank it like a 7.5, because I do think it dragged on a little too long, Yeah. But going back to the send-off, we get the group moment. We get Peter going back to Earth. He's now done with the Guardians, right? He goes and meets his grandfather, and I like till he walks in and he sees that his or that's not his grandmother, his grandfather's new girlfriend's black, and he's like, I think I'm at the wrong house, like.
Or he might have thought it was like a different house, like somebody else bought it. Or something.
Exactly.
That's what I felt like. Yeah. I showed up at this place and my childhood home is gone.
Right.
Deal.
And he's like, who's this lady living here? Like, I've never seen her before. And then his grandfather's outside, and they reconnect, and from there, I mean, it's pretty much the end of the movie. Then we get this couple. You save for the post credit scenes.
Yep.
Unfortunately,
long post credit scenes. I literally almost got up and walked out.
Dude, and I was expecting. I don't know if you remember, but Guardians 2 had like 5 or 6. Like, it had a ton of post credit scenes. Like, every few minutes there was another post credit scene. This one had 2.
Right.
So the first one, we get to see this new look Guardians with Rocket in charge,
right?
Which I like. I like that. It's kind of a callback to a lot of these other movies where Rocket and Star-Lord were kind of clashing,
right? About who's the captain and all this kind of stuff. Yep.
So he got his moment where he told them basically, you're now in charge, right?
Right.
So we got to see Rocket leading these new Guardians.
Which had that girl, right? If you notice her eyes, because all the other kids were just kids.
Yeah.
But this one girl, if her right eye was kind of lit up.
Yeah.
So she had some kind of powers.
So we'll probably see her again.
Yeah, you'll probably see her again.
Yeah. Now, do you think we're going to get another Guardians movie?
I hope not.
Yeah. I'm with you.
For several reasons. One, they kind of never really did it for me as a movie, as characters to begin with.
Yeah.
Number 2, what typically happens is they start changing characters or actors to play these characters. And that kind of messes things up. Like nobody can replace Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman is going to be a real hard replacement.
Yeah.
Things like that. So they start bringing in these different characters, and it just kind of messes up the movie. Yeah. And number 3, they're probably going to do another origin story. Now, if they do like a history, like a Rocket movie and make it good, Rocket history, that's cool. They do like a Mantis history, cool. Drax, but just to keep rehashing how, like Batman became Batman and Superman became Superman and Spider-Man became Spider-Man. I'm sick of those origin stories. Move on. There's so much content in these comic books. They can just pick up, and if I want to know a little bit of history about them, I'll go and read a comic or something from the past. But I now if they come up with a TV show, then they can have all new different characters. Just make them consistent and spend a little bit more time, finding the better characters. Like the Brie Larson character for Captain Marvel. I think that was like a Sam Jackson pullover from, King Kong Skull Island or something. I don't know what was going on, but she just does not fit that character at all.
No,
so, but that's just me.
Yeah. And I agree. I don't want to see at least not anytime soon. I don't want to see another Guardians movie. No. I'm not opposed to seeing them show up in other movies, like
crossovers. Or something.
Yeah, because if we got this multiversal war, that's this next saga. So obviously, there's going to be parts of it in space.
Sure,
I have no problem if it's in a Thor movie down the road or something, and the Guardians show up to help. I have no issue, or even just in an Avengers movie when you want to bring everyone together. I'm cool with that, but I don't need to see that.
Right.
And then we get to the last post or the end credit scene is Star-Lord sitting at the dining room table with his grandfather eating cereal, makes some kind of off-the-cuff comment about someone cutting their grass or something. It was even hard to hear what he said.
Right.
And then it ends, and you get the end title, like, the legendary Star-Lord will return. So we know we'll see him again soon.
Right. I just hope we don't see him as a different actor.
Yeah.
It's got to be, Pratt.
Yes.
So...
Yeah, I'm with you. So Marvel, don't screw that up. But all in all, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. I'm not in a rush to see it again. I'll watch it probably when it drops on Disney Plus. But I'm going 7.5 my final rating.
I'm gonna rate it about like what I did with Forever Wakanda, Black Panther, like a 4.5. I could have. This is I don't I don't know if you guys know what straight to DVD is.
Yeah.
But this was a straight to DVD movie for me. Besides the fact that I fell asleep a couple of times.
Yeah.
It was like a couple of dull moments, and then and maybe this whole movie was set up. Maybe I do need to see it again because when I first walked in the movie theater, there was this couple that came in. The guy was extremely funky. I had to move to a back row, and I still smelt him. So I was just predisposed. In the beginning of the movie. Maybe I'll just go and watch it again.
You sure he wasn't just eating like some nacho cheese? Maybe
when they first walked up, somebody was sitting in their seat.
Got it.
He made it a point to point me out to see if I was sitting in their seats. I'm like, dude, first of all, I'm not 2 people. I'm not sitting in 6 and 7. I'm in 5, right? Yeah. So they've the lady was being inappropriate and irate.
Yeah.
Just talk to the people. Say, hey, I think you're sitting in my seat. Right. No, but she evicted them from the seats.
Wow.
And then they sat down, and she wouldn't shut up. And then this dude sat down. He came in with this giant box of tub of popcorn. I thought what I was smelling was the popcorn.
Yeah.
It was him.
Damn.
It was just, and it was coming at me in waves.
Yeah.
And I'm hypersensitive to smells and sights and sounds and stuff. So it was torture. I tried to put my hand over my nose to kind of filter. That didn't work. I eventually moved him back to the handicap section, dude, because I couldn't stand it.
Got it.
So I was predisposed. Maybe I'll go and watch it. But
so it messed
4.5 to 5.
All right, I'm gonna go 7.5, 7.5. So, and yes, I hope we don't see another Guardians movie for a while.
Right.
And then so next week we're gonna break down. We'll do our top 5.
Yep.
Top 5 comic characters.
Comic characters or superheroes.
Ooh.
Because characters include everybody, the villains. So that's a whole nother
list.
list.
No, superhero. Yeah. Well, see, no, I have some villains on mine. So let's do characters.
Okay, let's do characters.
So top 5 characters. And we're talking from the comics, and then we'll discuss basically spoiler alert, y'all, I love Batman, so he's going to be on my list.
Yep.
And
Iron Man's on mine.
Iron Man's on it. So we'll talk about some of our favorite moments in the movies and comics and whatever, animated series. So, but we'll do it based off of their comic character.
Okay.
All right. Top 5 next week. Guys, join us next week. As always, we're going to be dropping every Monday here on The Comics. So, Adrian, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting.
Absolutely. Well, this was a good time. It was a decent movie. I can't wait to see, when these, and we'll make a point to review everything we can. My goal is to review it, give you our take on it. And what I love about doing this is we're not critics.
Nope.
We're not experts. We're just fans that just love the movies and love the comic book universe, I guess. And we'll come here once a week and talk about it. So thanks for watching, downloading. Thanks for joining me, Adrian. We'll see you next week.